This is AgGrad Live.
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
The show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry.
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, happy Wednesday. Coming at you with another AgGrad Live. This is a show we do every week where it's really my favorite part of my week, really. I get to sit down with somebody who's super talented and already doing amazing things early in their career and just pick their brain about what they're up to, what their daily life looks like, what they have done to get to the point where they're at. And it's just a lot of fun. And I have so much fun doing it that we get to broadcast it live in case you have time in your busy schedule to join us. So whether you're here live or watching this later, we are glad you're here. And we are going to bring on somebody who I have actually known for a little while, which is rare in these AgGrad Lives, that I actually have a history. I have the pleasure of talking today with Mr. Seth Pratt. Seth, welcome to the show.
Hello, Tim. Hey, thanks. Glad to be here. And likewise, the familiarity is fun.
It is. And so Seth and I are actually both in the Boise area, come to find out. And he texted me today and said, actually, I'm in Boise. You want to just do this in the same place at the same time? And I totally messed up and wasn't able to accommodate. But anyway, still glad you're here, Seth. You are a senior business analyst for the Context Network. So I want to back up here a little bit because what you do is consulting, but the word consulting is used in a lot of different capacities. So what in the work you do, what do you mean by consulting?
In the work that I do as an analyst, what that means is answering questions that clients have. And that is obviously pretty broad, right? They might be asking about varieties. We got asked yesterday about whether or not on cotton replant acres, does the technology provider charge a second technology fee? The question might be small and quick to answer. It might be something that takes us weeks to figure out. I get to be kind of the coordinator, the presentation builder, and any of the tasks of a given request that I can handle, the analyst does. I'm never the smartest person in the room. I'm never the most experienced person in the room, but I get to coordinate experts. I get to set these meetings up. And I get to be in the room when these experienced people work together.
And when people hear the word senior business analyst, their mind might go to a place of somebody who's kind of crunching numbers, maybe in a dark basement somewhere, just like analyzing just loads and loads and loads of data. But what's it really like in a day-to-day life sort of context?
So there's many forms of business consulting, right? So if I was working in, say, the IT space or some type of accounting space, it would be really heavy data. Now, for context, most of our experts are really folks with commercial experience, either commercial in marketing or sales, or maybe in preparing products that are going to go commercial. And so it's a lot of ag domain expertise. It's not necessarily general business functions like accounting or IT. Mm-hmm. And so as an analyst in that field, it's less of true data science. Now, we still build models. We still, work with some databases, a lot in Excel, but I don't spend days on end crunching large data sets. We have a few projects that are recurring projects for certain clients where we're creating data that doesn't exist. Some of those are some pretty heavy lifts. But for the most part, it's a lot of PowerPoint slides, Word business reports that are describing a business opportunity, or maybe an economic model that's built in Excel that describes how a business behaves. But it's, again, it like you're saying, it's not reams and reams of text files or CSV files. It doesn't look like that.
And so it's essentially you're answering hard questions to solve difficult business problems related to food and agriculture. How does one get into that, or how did you get into that? Maybe is a better way to ask that question.
To be honest, I got into it by knowing certain people, and then when the opportunity was presented, I had certain skills. So I was working as the junior and senior in college. I was working for the dean of our college on the fundraising team, and he was attending a Farm Foundation event, which is I'm sure many of your audience members know who the Farm Foundation is. They can be simply Googled. but it's a bunch of industry leaders, be they from academia or from private business, for-profit business. And he happened to be sitting at a table of Purdue alums, and the founder of Context, Trey Thomas, was at that table as well. They got to talking about what Context does, and Trey asked, hey, why don't you have a couple of students send me a resume? And so I did, not really knowing what I was getting into. And then they flew me to St. Louis for some interviews. They ask you to do things like, they might ask you to give a presentation on a data set that they give you 30 minutes before the presentation is to occur. They might give you a really ugly drawing and say, make this look good on a PowerPoint slide. And they also might just say, how would you measure the number of light bulbs that might be on at any given time in the city of Detroit? And so you come up with some type of a framework or way to communicate those answers. That's what it looked like for me anyway.
That's awesome. I'm not going to put you on the spot with your answer to the Detroit question. Let's talk a little bit about your ag background, because I think you have a really cool and somewhat unique ag background, I would say, in terms of being, a real working cattle ranch. So tell us about that.
So in 1904, my great-great-grandfather, Joe Pratt, came to Idaho from Wales, and he had a few brothers that came with him, a sister. They all settled kind of near one another in eastern Idaho. And what started out just as a few sheep and a couple of milk cows, and over time it became more and more of what you today call a cattle ranch. So my great-grandfather started that in the biggest way. And then my granddad grew it further. My dad did the same. My dad actually taught agriculture education for 12 years and then taught agribusiness management at the university for 4 or 6 years before he came home full time. And so he did kind of some off-farm work. I do on-farm, non-farm work. So I actually live at the ranch most of the time, but I'm working from the desk during business hours. And then night times and weekends, I'm spending a lot of that time on the ranch. And this time of year is the end of calving season, which has been a really busy time for us.
So for those not familiar, you guys are sending cattle up into the mountains for the summertime and bringing them back down in the winter. Cattle drives the whole bit. So
yes, and that's not just for the point of recreation. The reason for that is ground in the mountains is at a high altitude. It's under snow for months and months of the year. Mm-hmm. What that means is you can't grow a lot of row crops there. So your property values are quite a bit lower, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper to graze cows in the mountains than it is in the valley. So in the spring, those cattle will make the 40-mile walk. And then in the valley, we'll produce the forage that we then harvest, bale, stack, and feed through the winter.
So cool. So how does a background in cattle ranching help you in business consulting as an analyst?
I think in two ways. So we get presented with questions around what we think the value of a particular new product could be, or we get presented questions about what we think the reaction of growers or farmers might be to a specific marketing tactic. And just having a personal experience and a network of folks that work in production ag every day, understanding the way that they think, a cost-based mentality in producing commodities is different than what you see in a lot of other business sectors across the country. And so just that personal experience would be one. The second one would be that it gives me a lens into the way that a business owner needs to think, because when you're putting up the capital for a business, you think more in terms of risk and timeframes than you do as just a pure employee. And so a lot of times the folks that are our clients are the owners of these businesses. And so being able to think like they think to an extent is an asset.
I know you work from home, so you're remote or on the road, and you could see you have you can definitely recognize the hotel door behind you. So you're giving yourself away that you're in a hotel today. But what has worked well for you in being productive while working from home? Because that's something that I wrestle with all the time.
Absolutely. So I think this is going to become more and more common for people to work remotely. And I think especially in agriculture, we've got latent talent, underutilized talent across the country in rural communities that if we can have better internet connectivity, we can access a lot of these talented people. So I think we will need to do more of this. And also, just as a result of it being less common in the past, we haven't done a great job of putting together a lot of assets and information and recommendations and training about how to be an effective remote employee. So I think it's something everybody needs to do more of. And I don't claim that what's helped me would help everyone. But for one, growing up on a farm, I've been surrounded by my work my whole life, right? Work has always been just outside the bedroom. Like when I wake up, there is work all around. So it wasn't strange to me to be working from home. And if your home is an emotional space that is not work, maybe that's more of a jump than it's been for me. But my home has been a farm, and the farm was work. So that's one. The next one would be that I just check in with my colleagues a lot. If you're going to work remotely, you almost have to over communicate, because all these effects of hallways and water coolers and coffee machines, you don't have those gathering places where natural conversation occurs. So you have to create that manually. That's been a big piece of it. And then finally, at Context, and in most consulting firms, as far as I'm aware, it's billing hour structure. What that means is, though your positions are salaried, you need to record your time on various projects. So that's this really good ground truthing that at the end of every week, I've got to look back over those 5 days and say, how much of my time was spent on what project? And that just keeps me really objective.
And so you said for you, you've got to kind of build in the water cooler talk. Do you have an intentional way of doing that? Because I think that is a really, really good point. And something I'm realizing too is, I can be really productive, but if I'm missing those social interactions, I'm going to burn out quickly. And I haven't really come up with a systematic way to do that. What's worked for you on that?
So we just schedule it. We have colleagues that believe in this idea of a virtual coffee. And we schedule those at a regular interval, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, whatever it needs to be. And then we just recognize that those are very flexible. So if meetings come up or if things run long, we adapt as needed. But by holding time on a calendar, it just is a good reminder that you need to make time for those kind of things.
Okay, I'm going to throw you a curveball because I know you, and I know you can handle it. You spent, your career is kind of solving problems in agriculture, and I know you personally spend a lot of time thinking about sort of agriculture and the problems that exist. What do you think are challenges to our industry that maybe are top of mind for you, or perhaps we're not talking about enough?
That are top of mind. Okay, I probably think of a couple. The first one is going to be around, how do we talk about environmental, what people call impact, and agriculture? So we want to say that cows use water or that crops use water, but this is not a one-way system where you put water in and it can't be used for anything else, right? Water that goes on crops, much of that goes to the aquifer, or water that a cow drinks doesn't stay in the cow for eternity, obviously. So we need a way to figure out how, as agriculturalists, to talk about environmental science and environmental social concerns in a way that's scientifically valid and also emotionally appealing. Now, the soil health movement has done a good job of trying to navigate this social appeal, but also economic reality. And we need to see more of that happen. So I think environmentalism and the conversation around it is definitely one of them. Another will be rural connectivity, rural development. This is something you've put a lot of great focus on. And we just need to figure out a way to have better access and better connectivity in rural communities. Are doing good work there. And then finally, probably population in rural areas. This trade-off we have between labor and automation, whether you think that the tractor pushed out the farmer or that the tractor allowed the would-be farmer to go chase his or her other passions as a doctor or a lawyer or an artist. So whether you want to call the equipment the demon or the enabler, I think either could be argued, but we've got more of that coming, more automation. And we might even get smaller equipment in the future, because if I don't need a person in it, why do I need it to be that big, right? So that'll be a continuing theme over the next 20 years during my career, I believe.
Man, that's so impressive. You just pulled that out. I mean, I didn't tell you we were going to ask you that, but those are three legitimate issues. I think that definitely we need to tackle in your part of the world, which is southeast Idaho, if I'm getting my directions right. It is. Are you seeing kind of rural population decline? Is it a big issue for you locally there? I know you've got Idaho Falls to the north of you, and you've got if you went pretty far south, you got Salt Lake City down there. But are your local community kind of experiencing that?
So my home county's been flat for about the last 5 years. Before that, it had less than 2% a year gains. And the greater Yellowstone area is projected to grow quite a bit, mainly for tourism reasons. Now, if you go further west towards kind of central Idaho, they're having problems keeping schools open, and all the challenges that come with population decline. But for us immediately locally, no, we're flat and probably trending up on the region. You're kind of seeing, if you look at data, you're seeing different trend lines at different sets of scale, right? So the huge cities have a certain trend line. Cities of a certain size, like where we're at right now, Boise, has a given trajectory. And then I think my home community, so if I draw kind of an hour's drive circle around home, it's about 250,000 people. That particular group is either flat or slightly increasing or slightly decreasing, depending on influencing factors. For us, it's Yellowstone National Park that gives us a slight increase over time.
Do you think, I really appreciate your comments, by the way, on sort of environmentalism and agriculture and how the two sort of integrate. And do you think, you grew up in a really unique part of the world where you have Yellowstone right there, but yet you grew up in very much an agricultural family. Is that where kind of your passion for that topic sort of comes from?
I'm sure that's part of it. So places that I go for sanity are places that force my mind to unplug. So that's either riding horses or fly fishing, mountain biking, or skiing, things that I have to be really present of mind. And so that's something that I've spent time and energy on. So I'm sure that it influences it, Tim. The other piece that it does is because I grew up around those areas, in particular in the West, where we have a lot of public land, I see hunters, fishermen, ATV riders, and cowboys and farmers all using the same road in the same space as a common occurrence. And so I know that the cooperation between agriculture and more kind of pure play environmental concerns can be really healthy. And so when I see that degenerate into a contest or a debate, I know it doesn't have to be that way. And so that's probably growing up there has kind of given me that outlook.
So when we first met, you and I were both part of a trip to Liberia. You had just finished up your term as National FFA officer, and you were going, I think, probably back to college at that time and hadn't started your career. If you could go back to that Seth and kind of, hang out with him in Liberia and talk to him about how to approach the next, what has it been, maybe 6 or 7 years of his life, what would you tell him?
I would probably encourage to let him stop and enjoy the moment a bit more. Seth was a aggressive planner and had making all these judgments about Liberian governance and the post-civil conflict impacts sociologically and economically. And I probably would have said, hey, go enjoy the ocean a little bit. But at the same time, would I be in the position that I am if I hadn't been quite so intense back then? I don't know that for sure. As a member of the Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity, I did a couple of things. One was around people who encouraged me to relax. Like, not everybody needs to take college quite as seriously as I did. But secondly, in a fraternity, you really have to learn by example because it's 24/7, right? FFA does a great job of creating events. You show up, do a great, fantastic learning experience, and then everybody goes home. At Alpha Gamma Rho, it's every day, all the time. It's hygiene, it's parking, it's grades, it's just life, And that leadership experience was really valuable. The Seth that you're talking about wasn't sure yet And I would go to that, Seth, and I'd say, look, the fraternity is going to be one of the best experiences in terms of growing you and keeping you healthy through college. You'll love it.
Great. Yeah, I'm a fellow Alpha Gamma Rho, and we have a few more on the 30 under 30 list. So that's pretty cool to have that connection as well. I'm just hung up. I keep wanting to ask you more and more. I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time.
No, I've got the rest of the afternoon.
About the ag and the environment, and I think we struggle for a good language to use when we talk about those issues. Do you have any insights you can provide? Obviously we want it to be science backed. It seems like in some circles, the narrative has been, well, we just need to turn the food system on its head because it'll be better for the environment. Now, obviously, this week is when Beyond Meat just IPO'd. And so we've got plant-based meat. We've also got, talking about lab-grown meat, which is something different, but similar sort of premise. It's kind of like, well, we just need to take everything we've done and not do it anymore and do this totally different.
Right.
What do you say to that? And is there any sort of framework or language that you can help those of us who do believe, in prudent improvements to the current system to use?
So I should take time and write out a brilliant thesis that's comprehensive here, but obviously we don't have time for that. So this is going to be a bit of a cowboy Pratt shooting from hip. But a few things come to mind. So one is, we in agriculture, especially for the last 80 years, have been continually efficiency focused, right? We're price takers. And so we're all about, how do I produce more with less? And folks, we get questions about environmental sustainability and how do you reduce resource use? And we answer that by saying, oh, look how we fed more people, and we did it with no more resources than we required 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, mathematically, yes, we're producing more output for a lower environmental footprint. But that answer is not emotionally compelling to someone that doesn't know ag and hasn't ever been in a cost-based, efficiency-oriented business. And so I think efficiency is something we should still shoot for. I don't mean to say efficiency is bad, but we need to not expect folks to be motivated by an argument that might not be compelling to them. So efficiency would be one. Mm-hmm. The next would be that we feel personally challenged when asked these questions. Now, not everybody does, but it seems to be prevalent that a common response is, as a farmer or rancher, my livelihood is based upon the long-term health of my environmental assets. Therefore, I must be doing the right thing, and how dare you question me? Maybe a better response would think about what are the systems level, ecosystem level concerns that they have. So maybe they don't so much care about the irrigation method used on your Iowa farm as much as they care about water conditions in the Gulf of Mexico. So is there a way to take the water condition in the Gulf of Mexico concern, validate that, show that you recognize it, and then tie that back to your management decisions on the farm? Or you can do the same thing with the livestock supply chain. But it's trying to understand, what is the worldview and set of concerns that the question asker has, validating those and explaining how your production system lines up with those things. This doesn't have to be a debate. It can be much more of a conversation.
Right on. One of the fun questions that I ask everyone who comes on AgGrad Live in the little form to fill out to set up the interview is, if you saw yourself in the future on the cover of any magazine, what would it be? And you said Profitable Environmentalism. Is that really a magazine?
So am I choosing the magazine that I'm on the cover of? Is that how that the attention
Yeah,
is?
I didn't know if Profitable Environmentalism, is that a magazine?
Okay, well, no. Well, actually.
Or maybe you're creating the magazine. I don't know.
So there's a center in Bozeman called the Property and Environmental Research Center, PERC, P-E-R-C. They do a lot of work on profitable environmentalism or economic environmentalism, and I really like their work. I thought the question was, say you were on the cover of a magazine, what would the headline be? But no, it'd be Time, and it would say, this person's a champion for saving the environment and keeping a happy, healthy, well-fed world.
Okay, well, that's exactly how I want to tie this whole thing together to close out, which is you're a business consultant, a senior business analyst for Context Network, which does management and strategy consulting. You're passionate about the environment. Is it possible to solve business problems in a way that still optimizes environmental and sustainability concerns?
So I'm going to pitch one thing to answer that, because I've got to be honest. It is absolutely possible if all of the costs of the production are incorporated. So if we're getting free water, if we're getting free carbon emissions, then no, it's not possible, because market forces aren't going to correct for that. But if, for example, on raising cattle back home, if there was a price on the carbon that our cattle enabled to be sequestered, that creates a market force that's going to incent more of that behavior. So yes, I think if water was correctly priced and if carbon was correctly priced, now keep in mind that's way easier to describe than it is to actually execute. I think the carbon fee and dividend policy promoted by Citizens Climate League and authored by bipartisan congressmen is a great starting point. If you want to look that up, I think it's the best one we've currently got in print, but that's the goal. Incorporate all the production costs and let the market solve for it. Yes.
I love it, Seth. Well, I will tell you, you probably had it harder than most that are going to be on the show, because I know you, and I know you can handle it, and I know you like to be challenged. So I really appreciate this, and I love the sustainability. And sustainability, I hate to use, because it's got so much connotation to it now. But environmental consciousness with business needs, real business needs, and real agribusiness needs. So I really appreciate you being on here. If somebody wants to follow along with you and get great images of fly fishing and raising cattle in beautiful southeast Idaho, where can they follow you on Instagram?
So just look up Seth B Pratt. You can also just Google that with like FFA or AGR off the tail end, and it'll come up. My email address is on my Facebook profile. Certainly directly email. I'm happy to talk and visit. When I'm driving a tractor in circles around the field, it's great to be on a fun phone call. So I welcome all of those reach outs. I'm no savant. You've overstated my qualifications here, but I appreciate any interest.
I've already set the expectation too high. No, that's not true at all, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Congratulations on being selected for AgGrad 30 Under 30. Very well deserved. And I am excited for people to follow you on Instagram, because you got to post more, man. You have some great stuff. I love the fly fishing pics, the cattle pics. You gotta post more often.
I should post more often. You're right. I used to think that there was some future in politics and I needed to build this following, and I've kind of cooled on that. I don't even know how in the world I'd ever get elected. So I'm more forthright, and what you see is what you get.
Well, we appreciate that, and thanks for being on the show. For those of you tuning in, if you didn't catch all of it, maybe you hopped in midway or just got a few minutes here, you can watch it, of course, on Facebook, but also on our YouTube channel or as a podcast called AgGrad Live. So you can catch it on either of those two platforms as well. And thank you once again, Seth. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com. That's AGGRAD. To join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.